Hey, today we have another video. It's going to be a kind of just a general tips video. It's not about a deck, and I'm going to try to keep it a little shorter because I know people don't really like watching 25-minute videos. So, first up, not looking for lethal. I know I say this every video, but it's like the most important thing. If you watch my videos on Keep It Voth, you can see that my opponent missed a lethal that ended up losing them the game. So, killing the enemy general is the primary goal. Nothing else matters. You have minions on board, rush minion spells, opening gambits, and your general attack, along with your Bloodborne spell. I'm going to mention this in all my videos. It's the biggest thing new players don't understand because you're always trying to control the board. You hear that over and over, control the board, develop your minions. But, every turn should be like a puzzle to figure out if you can kill your enemy general. And the daily challenges and the solo challenges all great for learning this, kind of seeing the different ways your cards can come together just to push through damage. So make sure you look for lethal every single turn of the game. Next up is not replacing. Replacing is kind of a pretty unique mechanic. Pretty unique. I don't know how pretty unique you can be. It's not a very common mechanic in CCGs, as far as I know. Magic and Hearthstone don't have it. So people, when they play Duelyst, I don't think used to it, and I think they also tend to hold their cards, trying to play way in the future. But a lot of times you need new cards right now. So if you plan out your next couple turns and you don't see a card fitting in, it may be good just to get rid of that. There are exceptions to this. Some cards are answer cards, something like a Dispel. And a lot of times late in the game, if you have a game that you're going to win, holding on to something like a Dispel or a Demonic Lure or an answer to the, the kind of threats or kind of an answer to the answers that your opponent's going to present from you winning this game that you should win easily. Like if your opponent slams down an Amara Healer and you don't have a Dispel ready, because you replaced it for a more aggressive card, that's going to lose you games that you can win. So don't replace everything just because you don't want to play it on curve. There are situations when a card might not seem good, but in the situations where you would lose games, in the situation where the cards in your hands matter, this card is going to be good. Otherwise, you could have a blank hand. So there's some games, late in the game where you're going to keep replacing and try to get more late game cards, but your dispels and your removal and things like that are going to be the more relevant cards, even if they are, lower mana cost. And replace early in your turn. Once you assure which cards you don't need right now, replace early because then you could change your play. There's sometimes you have a whole plan turned out, or whole turn planned out, and then you replace and see another line. So do that early before you make all your attacks because it's really disappointing to, do all your attacks, then replace and find that you had a buff you could have played or you had a rush minion that could have come down and make a different trade. So make sure you do that early in your turn. Next is losing one games, and I think this is a really common problem for new players, is that when you're in a winning position, you want to finish the game cleanly and don't go for big flashy plays. Just try to do lethal damage and that's it. Don't try to play your big flashy minion because you think it's cool. I understand. If you're just playing for fun, fine, but don't get upset that you lost a game that you could have won. And think about your opponent's outs. Outs are the cards that get them out of a situation. So play the game from your opponent's perspective. Think about what cards in my hand, in their hand, what cards in their hand could sculpt a hand that wins them the game, that turns it around. Usually you're talking about things like direct damage, them just finding lethal out of nowhere, something like a Holy Immolation or a Mercantil Warbeast or some kind of AoE that will destroy your dominant board position, things along those lines. So you're looking for, basically AoE or, AoE or direct damage are going to be the type of cards that can win them the game. So play around that. Don't give them a good positioning for a Mercantor. Don't expose your general to damage. And make sure you're always repositioning your minions, even when you don't think it matters. A lot of times later in the game, you'll start just focusing on the minions closest to the enemy general. You're trying to push for lethal, you just focus on those. And sometimes, say, if I get a minion demonic whipped, I'll remember to move it the next turn, but then I'll start leaving it on the edge of the board and not keep creeping it in because you just start focusing on one area of the board because you think you're so far ahead. So make sure you're always making these incremental plays, the repositionings, the things that block off paths to your general, that will make sure your opponent can't get this come from behind victory, because those are the worst games to lose. And don't attack with your general on the turn where you're about to win if it doesn't actually matter for your calculations. Think about which minions you have, or how much damage you'd have on your next turn, and how much damage you'd have if certain minions die. And if it's lethal either way, don't attack with your general. Don't give your opponent that free 2 damage that could allow them to get the lethal damage on their turn. So, just think about those things. And the last is trying to build your own decks. And I think this is a really common new player thing, because you open some packs and you get a bunch of legendaries and you just figure you'll throw them all into a deck and then you'll throw a bunch of other cards. And the issue with this is the deck building is difficult. This isn't, unlike some CCGs, this Duelyst is pretty complex in terms of its curve and the mana costs, and a lot of the synergies are pretty ingrained to some decks. So you don't want to you can't just play a straight curve and expect to win, because a lot of games you don't play a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. That's not how Duelyst plays out. So you don't really want to build your own decks early, because you're trying to do 2 things at once. There's a saying, don't commit 2 crimes at once. This is a similar thing. Don't work at 2 skills at once, because it makes it very difficult to figure out where the issues lie. If you lose a game with a deck you built, it's hard to say, was that the deck's fault or was that my fault? Did I make play mistakes? And the answer is probably both. But it's hard to narrow down, what's causing you to lose when you're playing a suboptimal deck. And you're often going to be playing budget decks when you start out, so a lot of times you will just lose to card quality, and that's going to be a similar issue. But at least with a deck that's pre-built, even a budget deck, and you can see I have a bunch of budget decks that do pretty well, that can get you to diamond pretty easily. At least with those decks, there's a plan, and you can learn what the plans of different decks are, and then you can go make your own decks. But if you start out with your own decks, you really haven't learned enough about the game to follow through on the plans and understand what the working models for decks are in the game. And it's harder to get feedback. It's hard for people to tell you why you lost when they don't know the cards in your deck and you don't really understand the cards in your deck. And if you want to take a budget deck and throw some legendaries in place of some cheaper high value minions, or just swap out, that's fine, and I understand that's fun. But don't make the game hard on yourself. Just pick a deck, learn the deck, and then go make your own deck once you know how games are won and lost. Because otherwise, you're just throwing 40 cards in a deck, and that's not really what deck building's about. So I hope you guys enjoyed this quicker video that ended up being about 9 minutes. Because I know most people don't stick around for the full 20. Please like and subscribe my videos, because that makes me happy, and it probably doesn't bother you guys too much. I just like my numbers. I'm almost at 100, and when we get to 100, I'm going to give away some more Steam cards. I think I got like 10 left, so we'll give away those, and then we'll think of something else to give them away. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope this helps a little bit.